Welcome back to the Personal Injury Show. We're discussing people who are injured and what the courts do in circumstances where people are injured. We're looking at the second case for tonight, which is a recently decided case in the Supreme Court of Victoria. And the case has been published. It may be subject to appeal. We're not quite sure, but the judge has published reasons. It's a dispute between Mrs. Ogden, who was the manageress of a hotel in South Melbourne, and I think in May 2005 there was an armed robbery, and the takings of the weekend, robbery at Monday morning, the takings on the weekend were about $45,000. They were confiscated by the armed robber, and Mrs. Ogden suffered what's called post-traumatic stress, and since 2006 she's been unable to work, and the court awarded her $825,000 in damages, and the court made a number of findings. The first question is, Tony, there's an armed robber who comes into a hotel and robs someone at let's say, gunpoint. Why is the hotel responsible? They can't control what armed robbers do. An armed robber just went in, stole some money and left.
In a work environment, you've got to have a safe system of work. There was a lot of evidence led in this case about how she was...
But what can a hotel do if someone plans an armed robbery?
Well, they could have taken precautions, which is, for example, they could have had video surveillance. There was some talk about video surveillance in this, but there was a lot more that could have been done. They could have had surveillance that would have made it harder for an armed robber.
But even if they had video surveillance, let's say the armed robber then came in and succeeded, why is the hotel negligent?
Well, look, if they had taken those precautions, it would have made it harder for Mrs. Ogden to win her case.
But that's looking back, that's looking retrospectively, backwards.
Oh, look,
how
anyone using reasonable foreseeability, it was predictable that something like that could happen. I mean, you know, it's common knowledge that a hotel takes a lot of money between Friday and Sunday, and she was collecting the money on the Monday to take to the bank. There was also some suggestion about a system of work where she was supposed to enter the premises with more than one person, so it wasn't easy for her to be held up. There was more than one person that was supposed to accompany her to the bank, or the local police used to accompany them to the bank, her or someone else to the bank, if the takings were large.
But so the judge found the hotel was negligent?
Yeah, the system of work was not safe.
Okay.
It was a breach.
And in those circumstances, there's fault and the hotel's negligent. What follows from that?
Well, then the judge has to assess her damage and award her damages. Now, the damages are broken up into the two sections of general damages, which is pain and suffering, loss of enjoyment of life.
And what did the court order in this case?
She gave her $300,000 knocked off 20% for non-accident related damage.
Okay.
And the non-accident related damage in this case was a police raid on her.
Is that fair?
I reckon she got a good, yeah, $240,000 sounds like a lot of money, considering the upper limit's about $430,000, so, yeah.
And what about the other components? So that was $240,000
for pain and suffering, loss of enjoyment of life. She got and the balance was for loss of income past, present and future. And that was made up of earnings and superannuation losses. In effect, she got just about everything she asked for.
But could
less
she
20%.
Could she have worked? You know, was she working? What happened?
Yeah, she did look for work after the incident. She had a couple of trial periods at this employer. That didn't work. Then she went off to some restaurant in Carlton. That didn't work. So the court was satisfied. And mind you, the medical evidence was all one way. It did say her capacity to work in the future. In other words, her loss of income was, we say, total. She had a totally diminished capacity for work.
Okay. But the other unusual factor in this was that a year after the robbery, the police raided her house, arrested her on suspicion of conspiracy to rob the premise. The owners of the hotel spoke to the police. They voiced their suspicions that she was somehow involved in the robbery, and the police took that up and raided her house. I think she was handcuffed, led and questioned, never charged.
No.
What's the effect of all of that? So that's a year after, and she was traumatised by that as well.
Well, the hotel lawyers argued that that was an intervening act and that her psychological situation was, there was a break in the chain of causation, her damage wasn't caused by...
What does that mean?
Well, her damage wasn't caused by the armed robbery as such. The subsequent action of the police to arrest her...
It was something totally unexpected,
totally
unusual.
unexpected, yeah.
But the judge accepted that, didn't she?
She did. She reduced her damages by 20%. But in the normal course of events, she would have got 15% taken off anyway for daily vicissitudes. Daily vicissitudes is when you walk out, you can get hit by a bus and, you know.
What does that mean?
Well, let's say you damaged $100. The judges normally take off $15 because they say the risk of you going outside and getting hit by a bus. In this case, instead of taking off $15 for every 100, she took off $20. So she said her risks of not working, etc., will increase by that 5% because of the armed robbery.
Okay, but just getting back to negligence, are you saying that all hotels who have cash on the premise have to take significant steps to plan for, in a sense, deterring robbery?
You've got to deter it, that's number one. You've got to have a proper system of transporting this cash from the premises to a bank or whatever.
Interesting.
Or reduce the amount of cash on the premises.
Interesting, by coincidence, the police somehow arrived regularly on a Monday morning.
Yeah,
They
well,
often escorted her and then came back to the hotel for some drinks.
yeah, well,
Is that a coincidence, or is that a...
I don't know. I think
Is that a coincidence?
It's not a coincidence. I think the owners were aware of the risks of being held up, and on this occasion it didn't happen.
But the police weren't there on
they
Monday
weren't,
morning.
no.
She opened the hotel, I think, 7:45 a.m, and there was $45,000 in cash. The hotel was both a hotel and a TAB.
That's right.
Well, one thing I think the judge commented on was, can you put takings into a night safe each night? Why accumulate 3 days of takings when each night you can then just transfer money somehow into a night safe? So that reduces the amount of money.
The amount of cash on the premises.
But the robber knew the habits of the hotel and had, cased the joint, if you like.
Well, it's just...
It appears to be a planned robbery. It wasn't a spur of the moment.
No, it was planned. And it was an interesting spin on all this because the photo fit that the plaintiff gave was a description of someone that the police said was known to the plaintiff. It's just an interesting set of facts.
Well, that could have happened, but I mean, again, there was no evidence that she was involved at all.
No.
And I think they ran the case that somehow there was some suspicion that she was involved, but that came to nothing in effect. But as I say, negligence by the hotel is the first thing the judge looks at, and the judge found a lot of reasons why the hotel was negligent in this particular case.
It was a pretty shoddy operation in terms of safety.
Well, they were shoddy up to a point, but they could have taken steps which the judge said they should have taken. So they should have been a bit more proactive.
That's right.
In what they'd done, and it was a very it was I think a well-reasoned decision by the judge. Everything was argued, and the judge had to weigh up all those issues and come up with a verdict. The judge then came up with an award of damages of $825,000.
It's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money, and traumatic incident, and it could have been avoided.
That's right.
That's all we've got time for at the moment. We'll be back after the break for the balance of the show.